My parents made me the scapegoat of the family for decades, but when I finally learned the secret about why they hated me, I discovered the truth was more twisted than I ever could have imagined. I grew up believing that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, though I could never put my finger on what it was. While other kids I knew had parents who cheered them on at soccer games, hung their drawings on the refrigerator, or hugged them for no reason at all, my parents seemed to look at me like I was a constant disappointment they were forced to tolerate. I was the oldest of 3 children, yet the way my parents treated me compared to my younger brother, Daniel, and my sister Claire, was like night and day, from as early as I can remember. If something broke in the house, it was my fault. Daniel got a bad grade, they'd ask what kind of example I was setting. If Claire cried, I was accused of bullying her. When I tried to defend myself, my parents would say I was too sensitive or always playing the victim. I became the family scapegoat before I even knew what the word meant. As a child, I assumed this was normal, that every family had a kid who bore the brunt of everything. But over time, the cracks in that belief widened. My siblings were showered with affection. Daniel got brand new sports gear every season. Claire had a bedroom that looked like it came straight out of a catalog. Meanwhile, I wore hand-me-downs, shared a room that was barely big enough for one, and was constantly reminded that I was lucky to have a roof over my head. Birthdays were the worst. Daniel had parties at trampoline parks and bowling alleys. Claire had princess-themed celebrations with cakes that looked like works of art. For me, my birthdays usually slipped by with maybe a single candle stuck into a grocery store muffin. At school, teachers would ask why my parents never showed up for conferences or events, and I'd shrug it off with excuses, even though inside I was burning with shame. I remember one time, around 12 years old, I scored the winning goal in a soccer match. Parents from the other team actually clapped me on the back. But when I ran toward my mom and dad, they were already packing up the car, faces blank. Don't get cocky, was all my father said as I climbed into the back seat. The strangest part, though, was that I couldn't figure out why. What had I done that made me so unworthy of their love? By high school, the alienation grew unbearable. Daniel was the golden child, the one Dad bragged about at work. Claire was the darling, spoiled by Mom with spa days and shopping trips. And me, I was the black hole sucking up their patience. If Daniel stayed out late, they called it boys being boys. If I so much as missed curfew by 10 minutes, I was grounded for weeks. The only place I felt alive was in books. I devoured novels like oxygen, immersing myself in other worlds where children were heroes and parents cared. I kept a journal too, where I wrote down everything, every slight, every cold look. Every time I was punished for something I didn't do. Somewhere, deep down, I think I was preserving evidence, though I couldn't yet say of what. By the time I turned 18, I bolted. College was my escape hatch, funded almost entirely by scholarships and part-time jobs because my parents had made it clear they wouldn't support me financially. You'll never amount to much anyway, my father said the night before I left, his voice thick with disdain. But maybe you'll prove me wrong. Doubt it, though. The bitterness of that moment stuck with me for years. Even away from them, though, I carried the scars. I second-guessed friendships, always wondering if people secretly disliked me. Romantic relationships crumbled because I couldn't shake the fear of abandonment. Still, I clawed my way up. I became a teacher, found purpose in guiding kids who needed encouragement, maybe because I knew so well what it felt like to be deprived of it. I built a small life, quiet, steady, with people who valued me. And for a long time, I thought that was enough. But family has a way of pulling you back into its orbit, no matter how much distance you try to put between yourself and them. The shift happened after my father passed away unexpectedly. I was 31 then, and the call from my mother hit me like a wave. Her voice trembled, not with grief, but with something closer to panic. You need to come home, she said. There are things you should know. Against my better judgment, I went. The house I grew up in was both familiar and foreign, like a stage set left to collect dust. Mom looked older, thinner, but her eyes still carried that same coldness when they met mine. Claire was there too, consoling her with practiced affection, while Daniel seemed strangely withdrawn. I braced myself for another round of feeling like an outsider, but instead, I got something entirely different. It happened the second night, after the funeral, when my mother asked me to sit down at the kitchen table. She pushed a show box toward me. Inside were letters yellowed with age, some still sealed, others torn open. Confused, I pulled one out and began to read. It was addressed to her from a man named Richard, dated the year before I was born. My breath caught as I scanned the words, promises of love, regret about the baby, and arguments about what to do next. I looked up at my mother, my heart thundering. Who was this? Her face was stone. Your real father, she said. Finally, not the man who raised you. The room seemed to tilt. I read more letters, piecing together a story that shredded everything I thought I knew. My mother had been in love with Richard, but her family pressured her to marry the man I grew up calling Dad. When she got pregnant with me, the timeline didn't match. There was no doubt I wasn't his child, and from that day forward, I became the living reminder of her mistake. My siblings, Daniel and Claire, were both my father's biological children. I was the odd one out, the mistake she couldn't grace but also couldn't accept. Every punishment, every cold dismissal, every time they made me the scapegoat, it all traced back to that secret. I was the child of another man. A man she had loved but lost. Rage and grief knotted in my chest. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded. Her voice cracked, the first time I'd ever heard it waver. Because I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now. I stumbled out of the house that night, letters clutched in my shaking hands. I drove for hours, trying to make sense of the revelation. It explained so much, yet it also created 1,000 new wounds. Was I ever truly part of that family? Did my siblings know? Did my father know? In the weeks that followed, I confronted Daniel and Claire separately. Daniel admitted he'd always suspected he'd overheard our parents arguing when he was little. Claire, on the other hand, was furious at me for bringing it up, accusing me of trying to ruin the family's memory. But what family was there to ruin? The truth had already burned it down. I spent months spiraling, therapy sessions barely scratching the surface of the betrayal I felt. For so long, I thought I was simply unlovable. Now I realized I was unloved, for reasons beyond my control. Yet, strangely, that knowledge became a turning point. I wasn't defective. I wasn't cursed. I was just the collateral damage of choices made before I even drew breath. I began to rebuild, this time with a firmer foundation. I reached out to Richard, the man who might be my biological father. It was a leap of faith. I didn't even know if he was alive, but he was. And when he answered my letter, his words brought tears I hadn't shed in years. I've thought about you every single day. Meeting him was surreal, like staring into a mirror that finally reflected back something familiar. He wasn't perfect, but he wanted to know me. For the first time, I had a father who saw me not as a mistake, but as a son. It didn't erase the pain of the past, but it gave me something to hold on to. My story isn't neat, and it isn't wrapped in a bow. My parents made me their scapegoat, and the scars of that role will never fully fade. But now I know the truth, and in that truth, I found freedom. I am not their mistakes. I am not their hatred. I am my own. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this.